This is a video recording of Sal Brownfield, who is a successful artist in Atlanta and a longtime Subud member. And I'm going to start out by asking, how did you find Subud? How did you come into Subud?
I was newly married, and my wife and I had moved into a little house in a very bad part of the neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. And because of, she was about to have a child. And so we were very concentrated on our own lives. So we hadn't seen many of our friends for quite a long time. And one morning she woke up and she said, you know, I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamt that his name was Dick Batchelor at that point. He became Robert Batchelor. And Bruce Sherman, who was these two friends of mine, of ours, came by and knocked on the door. And Robert had this great package wrapped in ribbons and bows, and she said it was just wonderful. And it came in and they spent the whole afternoon. I said, well, that's a nice dream, yeah. Well, the next afternoon, Robert and Bruce knock on the door of our house, or that afternoon, the afternoon of the morning she told me about this. And we opened the door, and it was like Kathy and I were both astonished that here they were after her dream. And he handed me this book, and he said, I've really needed to bring this to you. And it was J.G. Bennett's book concerning Subud. So obviously we invited them in, and I went into the kitchen, and Kathy entertained them in the living room, and I read through the book 3 times. And I came out and handed it back to him. And I said, you know, I finally have heard something that I've been trying to say to myself every day of my life. And he said, well, I think we ought to try to get hold of these people. And I said, yeah, let's see what we can, if we can find a group. So there was a group in Cleveland. Robert was opened, I think, on the 17th of January, 1965, and I was opened on the 25th of January, 1965. And that began, as you may remember, in those days, we were given a lot of reasons to head for, I called evidence of the strength of this Latihan from every time I would step outside, it would rain. I would go outside on a perfectly lovely starry night, and I'd get to the car and be raining on me. It was inexplicable. And the night after I got opened, my mother-in-law, who didn't really approve of my looking for this spiritual path, had sent a postcard anonymously of 2 bums leaning against a wall on the street near the gutter. And one of them is turned to the other saying, no, I'm waiting for greatness to be thrust upon me. So that was kind of the tone around us from her family. So it was a struggle in terms of keeping that together. But the experiences were so strong, as it was for many of us in those early days, that what we saw as the reality of the Latihan and the great gift and grace that it was provided a great deal of underpinning to continue with this. So Robert and I would go to Cleveland every couple of weeks, actually, from Columbus, which is about an hour and 45-minute drive at that point. And soon after we were opened, there were 5, 6, 7, they just started popping up to be opened. We had this, little caravan of people going to Cleveland to be opened. And then we used Robert's offices behind his house to do Ladian in, and he'd been a bookmaker. So he had an office that his accountant kept telling him he needed to spend money. So he rented an office and so he could spend money, and we would do Ladian there. But the thing that was significant about it to us at that time was when we would go to Cleveland, the most noise that was made in the Cleveland Subud group was a man from England who hummed Brahms' lullaby. That was it. That was just all it was. So one of our brothers wanted to go to New York to take the QE2 to England. So we were all going to drive him because Bapak was going to be there. And so we did take Bruce, and he got on the boat, and we went down to the 23rd Street Subud house. I think it was on 23rd in New York City. And man, did that change the texture of the Ladian back in Columbus, Ohio. There were people running, dashing across this great hall and throwing themselves into the wall and making all kinds of noises. And I sort of stood in the corner kind of watching all this going on. And I remember a Subud brother named Ferry Farkas came over and stood beside me. He said, is this your first time in a large group? I said, yeah, it is. He said, well, this is the freedom of the Ladian. And I said, oh, yeah. So we took that, Robert and I took that back to Columbus with us to share with the brothers there that, yeah, it's okay to let go.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, the Subud group in Columbus grew and grew, and as we've all experienced, I think one of the greatest incentives within the Subud soul is when you have to move, when it's time for you to be somewhere else. And so the Subud group in Columbus just sort of did that almost all at once to California. And I was left sort of holding the door for everybody as they went out. 3 brothers who were living together called me if I could come over and clean up the house. And I went over and cleaned up the house. And it was like they finished breakfast and went and got in the car and drove away. It's time to go. And off they went.
So was that the end of that group?
It was pretty much the end of the Columbus group. Yeah, there were a few. I was a helper at that point, and there were some pretty serious cases there with regarding mental illness and attempted suicides and things like that needed. The only thing I can presume is that they needed attention up until the end. And one brother whose family would call me when he needed to be recommitted, and I would go over and I would try to do Ladian with him. And so, but it was very interesting because just God wasn't going to let him commit suicide so easily, because one time he threw himself out of the 3rd-story window and he landed in a tree. And he was horribly disappointed, but it was like, it's not going to work. But one time, and this was not long before I was able to leave, his parents called me that they had to take him, and would I come with them to take him to the state hospital? And I did. And going there, I sort of looked up in the sky, and this enormous meat cleaver just came down out of the whatever and cut this little cord that existed between this man and me.
Wow.
And I walked him on in to be registered. And that night he succeeded in killing himself. So at that point, it was pretty clear in that particular circumstance that I was free to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't long after that that I got, I left Columbus and went to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then ultimately sent to Los Angeles. And they were talking about Echo Park, and my first night in Echo Park, a brother there who I had known from Columbus came up to me and said, "I'm glad you're here. This guy right over here wants to beat up this guy. We won't let him to do Latihan. So instead of you doing Latihan, maybe you would just walk around with him until the men are finished." I had just finished like a 20-hour drive. I was looking forward to a Latihan. So we're walking around, and he looks at me and says, "I suppose you're walking with me to keep me from beating him up." And I said, "Yeah, I think that's probably what's going on." But so that was my first night at Echo Park. And but in terms of experiences, just, it goes on and on. They've just sort of, I think, rather melded into my nature, I would say. Incidences maybe aren't quite as memorable as they were, but the result of things seem to be quite profound to me.
Yeah.
They have become more or less what I've become, the experiences that I've had. Yeah.
Have you had any experiences around BAPOC?
Yes. When Bapa arrived in New York, most of us, an awful lot of us, went out to the airport to meet him. And it's interesting memory, because Bapa and Ibu came down the little ramp into the sort of the big lobby where all the Subud members were gathering. And he walked into the middle of the room, and it was like moths to flame or ants to honey. And it just like all started pushing in on him. And once that started, I backed way up. I thought, no, this can't be right. This is like not my scene at all. And I stood there sort of aghast that they would be doing that.
Yeah.
And a couple seconds passed by, and I just was looking, and I looked over there. Here's the pod, and over there's Bapa. Not in the middle of this pod at all. It's as if everybody, but he just managed out of it, and he's looking at me going, and I tell you, I felt so much better. It was like, yeah, okay, I feel good about that.
Yeah. So the physical BAPOC was not the same BAPOC that you were seeing then.
Well, he looked the same, but what he wasn't was where he should have been with all that other pressive activity on it. There were other occasions with Bapa where, like with my name change, it became Salahuddin. I kept receiving a name in Latihan that I thought was Saladin, but it had a hiccup in it. Every time I said it in Latihan, there was a hiccup in it. But I didn't know of any name that sounded like that except Saladin. So Bapa had asked me for a list of names, as he would do in those days. And I wrote, and I said, I can't send you a list of names. This is what's been coming to me in Latihan. He wrote back and said, you're almost right. He said, it's Salahuddin. Well, that obviously explained the hiccup.
Oh,
So another time, this was a very strange situation. Bapa was taking, I was a national helper, and Bapa was taking the national helpers to task for the national helpers had sent out something to the US suggesting pretty strongly that certain tests be done by the groups here and there around the country. And Bapa was kind of appalled that the national helpers would take it upon themselves to pretty much tell the groups what they ought to test. So, and he was in New York. And sort of an announcement went out when everybody was coming into the meeting that Bapa wanted to have all the national helpers come up in front of him. Well, I looked around, and 3 of the national helpers that were there at that time, I saw go out the door just as soon as that announcement was made. So I found my little self, like I felt like I had a little beanie in my hand or something, walking up in front of Sharif and Bapa, you know. And Bapa just read me the riot act in front of the entire congregation about things that we as national helpers were not entitled to do. And I can remember the faces of a couple of the brothers that left just before that encounter, looking back like saying, I'm out of here. Let me out of here. So it was interesting to be scolded by Bapak. But the thing about it was, I think I felt mildly embarrassed, and I felt chastened, but I didn't feel in the least bit abused. I felt more like you're being instructed.
mhm.
You know, I'm not mad at you. I'm not picking on you. I'm instructing you. This is how you do things.
Yeah.
And another time, I was the liaison with the national secretary for New Helpers at one point. Again, when Bapa was coming to New York. And one brother who had become a helper and I had been good friends for a good while, and I had sent him his helper's kit, which we did in those days. And, in the helper's kit, I probably, in a very naughty mood, I suppose, put in a Groucho Marx nose and glasses, mustache in his kit, his helper kit.
So well, I'm not sure I understand which is helper what?
A helper's kit, which was like Bapa's advice and guidance to helpers,
Yeah,
and a helper's card,
yeah.
things like that. So you would send that to the new helpers at the time.
Okay, yeah.
But in that envelope, I put a Groucho Marx nose and mustache and glasses. So accompany his kit. Well, this wonderful sister was not having anything to do with it. She was totally annoyed with me. I mean, just that I should trivialize this. And I told her I wasn't trivializing it at all. I just was putting some humor in it. So I showed up at the door to go into the meeting. I didn't have my helper's card with me. And she said, I can't let you in. I said, what do you mean? She said, you don't have your helper's card. I said, we've known each other for 15 years. What do you mean you can't let me in? She said, I can't let you in. We got to have cards. So just then, up the stairs come Bappa and his entourage, his group of people, entourage. And I said, excuse me a second. And I walked over and I opened the doors for them to walk in. And they went in and sat down. And so she left her table, left checking people's cards. And we went in and we were actually sitting pretty close together. And Bappa began his talk and wanted to thank everybody. And he would like to have the helpers come down front. And he'd like, because he had let's have a few words to say to helpers in the beginning. And he said, you know, helpers do this and helpers do that. And then he looked over and he said, some helpers open doors. Which was, you know, I kind of looked over at her. We kind of smiled at one another. And,
Yeah.
But my thing about this, most of my life, I think, in Subud is that it is such a remarkable, that's even not even, that's paltry. I mean, it's astonishing. It's beyond comprehension, this thing that we have that's called the Latihan, that it was so serious that it's too hard to be somber about. I needed to bring some other kind of levity in. For me, it was kind of not crushing exactly, but big. And I needed to be a little more, bring a little more humor into it. I guess I'd always been the class clown, I suppose, when I was a kid and so on. But that always felt important to me. And in fact, you know, when the international helpers were designated at the Toronto Congress, there was a complaint that the time was running very, very short. So the reports had to be very quick and should be truncated if they could be. And one brother was Councilor Organizasi, and I was Councilor Kejiwan from the US. And I said to him, I said, listen, when we give up to give our report, let's give it simultaneously. So we give up to get our report, and it was like 1, 2, 3, and we both start talking at the same time. Different reports, the whole thing. You know, the only person in the room that laughed was Bappa. He knew the humor in it, I think. Everybody else was like, what are you doing? This is, you know. And so things like that. But we were at the time when we would drive, you know, as you did. I know from your photographs. He was going to be over there someplace. 12 of you would get in a Volkswagen Beetle and be there somehow. We would do the same thing. I was in the Midwest and went from being the Midwest regional helper to being the Midwest or the national helper, retiring at the Congress in England. In
83.
83, yeah. In fact, you have a picture of me sitting out behind the big tent. sort of in that state that I look at now when you're no longer a national helper. And it's like suddenly what you thought belonged to you doesn't anymore. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I often, would also be in a place where Bapa was, like in one time in LA. Was it LA? I think it was in LA. Bapa had given a talk about ancestors and about our connection with them. And I was a helper that was sort of manning one of the helpers' rooms for people who had crises and so on could come into. And he had talked about, the fact that our close ancestors could be in touch with us. And I suddenly had to go back to somebody's room. So Harlan McWillis gave me a key to his room, and I went back to the room in the hotel. And I could tell when I got this, I had just a very, very short time to get there and to get laid out. So I got there and fell fast asleep. And as I was sleeping, I looked up, and my father, who had died not so long before, was walking through the wall, and he had forearm crutches. He had died of multiple sclerosis, and he had been bedridden. And he said, I only have a couple of minutes. He said, I only have a brief period. I just want you to tell you that you must keep doing what you're doing. And that the nurses here are taking really, really good care of me. And as you can see, I'm learning how to walk again. And he said, that's all the time I have, but you keep doing this thing. And turned and walked back through the wall. And of course, as you've probably experienced, you wake up from that totally refreshed. It's like you've had, 16 hours of sleep and a couple of cups of coffee. You're just ready to go.
Oh.
So I attribute that to Bapa's talking about ancestors and the connection we have. And I think that somehow my father was invited in to that because of that. At the same conference with Bapa, he asked for people to stand at the edge of the little raised stage where he was giving his talk, so because he had felt that someone there might try to attack him. So, well, sure, so I got up and stood at one corner of the stage, and somebody else, I forget who it is, stood up at the other side. And there was a lot of testing going on, a lot of other things. And after it was all over, I was talking to somebody, and it was Hanafi Weinstein said, I talked to some other people. Everybody was scared to death of you. I said, why would anybody be afraid of me? And she said, I don't know. You were putting out some sort of energy that was, and I felt while I was doing that I had some real permission from Bapak to be putting some energy out.
Mm-hmm.
That, there was a job there to do, and I was given the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah.
So maybe to the point where if somebody had thought maybe they would do something like that, here's this scary guy on this end of it. Another time with Bapa, some of these things are kind of embarrassing with Bapa, because when I was a national helper, one of my great, wonderful loves was Baroness Michelle von Reuch-Lewinsky, whom I'm sure you remember.
Say that again. I didn't quite hear.
Michelle von Reuch-Lewinsky.
Yeah.
We were national helpers together, and we traveled a lot. And we went to New York, and I think I may have been 24, 25, and I was going to give a talk to the New York group. And that felt a little odd. But we was prepared. And Michelle, who would, seemed perfectly reasonable that she would give us talk about Subud. We sat down in our chairs to give our talk, and she said a few words, I said a few words, and she started something, and then I started to say something, and I started getting really nervous looking out and seeing these old time Subud members from the 50s, and my little voice comes in and says, man, just shut up and talk. So the next week, Bapa's going to show up. So Bapa comes in, and Ed Kerner, who was New York group, an old Subud, worked at the UN with Virendra, grabs me by the arm and wants me to meet Bapa. So he takes me over to Bapa, and he hands me to Bapa and says, here's one of your true helpers, Bapa. And I'm thinking, no, Ed, this, please. And I got the most sort of like a very, very limp kind of handshake from Bapa, and kind of a look like, yeah, whatever. It was what I felt. It was like, yeah, Ed, whatever. Okay. So, but the fact that Ed would present me like that really threw me off as I met Bapa in that circumstance.
So I'm sorry, I missed something in what you said. How did he present you?
He presented me, he wanted me to meet Bapa. So he very enthusiastically took me over to Bapa and sort of handed me over to Bapa saying, here's one of your true helpers. And Bapa had said years ago that maybe in 10 or 15 years, there'd be one true helper in the US, right? Something to that effect. And I just was, I forgave Ed for it later on, but I was really put off because, you feel like, well, Bapa's going to see through all, saw through all of the crap. And Ed's enthusiasm was appreciated, and I just really liked the way he responded to my trying to do what I was doing. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was carrying a little far afield.
Right.
Another interesting episode with Bapak was when he came to New York at one point. A bunch of us drove from Columbus to New York, and we happened to get a room right under his room in the hotel. And it was really strong. And one of the brothers there, the guy actually who had opened me, a guy named Lauren Veers, was determined that he wanted to see Bapak. And so he would creep up the back stairs, the hotel, to try to see Bapak. And he came back down one night, sort of really chagrined, and he said that he had sat there on the steps on that floor level, looking around to try to see Bapak. And he was watching Bapak sitting in one of the little sitting rooms up there, watching the fights. And Mas Usman walked past and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I wanted to see Bapak." And Usman looked around and could see that from where Lauren was, he could see Bapak. He said, "Well, you've seen him." Go on. So Lauren came back down to the room, just really sort of put off, and he said, "I really need to do Latyan." So a number of us started to do Latyan, and I had been going through a thing where for maybe 18 months now, because of the latihan, I had not been able to laugh. Could not laugh. And whenever I said anything, I could actually see the words go between people's heads. It was like nobody could hear what I was saying. And I couldn't laugh at anything. So, and when I did laugh, it was like, ha ha ha, just fakey. And so they start doing latihan. And I feel Bapa sort of in the room, kind of, and I just start to weep. And I fall to the ground. I'm just like overwhelmed. And it was like feeling that, so I start laughing out loud and look up and call all of my other brothers sons of bitches standing there. It's like they're all laughing and having a great latihan, and I'm weeping and laying on the floor in a crumpled mess. And you son of bitches. Yeah. You might have to bleep that. I don't know. But I felt Bapa there with it was like, okay, it was almost like, okay, you've had enough of this now. It's whatever it was, it's enough. And from then on, it became very easy for me to laugh and enjoy myself, enjoy laughter. So there are, other strange stories. I mean, as a national helper, it's like, I had one task once where I was given to actually take someone's Subud card away from them, which I don't know that's ever happened since, and I know it had never happened before. And it was dreadful. I mean, it's like, who am I to do that? So I wrote to Sharif, they were in town. And I wrote to Sharif, I said, what is this? And I got a note back from Sharif that said, Bapa wants me to tell you that you have all that you need to do what needs to be done. Which at the moment was not very satisfactory to me. It sort of made me feel like, well, you're out on your own. Whatever, this is just what you have to do, and you're going to have to do it. So that happened. At another time, in a similar instance, Bapa had talked to us, had sent us sort of instructions about how to find the new chair people for Subud USA and the process of going through it. And in Chicago, when we were having a national Congress there, we needed to find a new chairman. And Bapa had given us pretty clear instructions about how to do that. And so I was going to stick to his advice about how to do it. I wasn't going to get, if a day went by, I wasn't going to get tired of trying to do it the way Bapa had hoped we would do it. So it did go on for a day. And it went into the next day. Still didn't have a chairman. And the national helpers were not going to stand up and do the testing. And it was something that needed everybody to experience, according to Bapa's guidance to us. So I wrote, or somehow I got a message quickly to Sharif, and Sharif got a message to Bapa, and Bapa got back to us, and he said, I can remember it so well. He said, Salahuddin, Baba can do this in 15 minutes. Takes you 2 or 3 days. That's about right. But the audience at that point was livid. They were like ready to lynch me because I seemed to be at the center of the National Helpers dais up there and wasn't going to let it get away with like, oh, come on, let's just, I wasn't going to do it. Well, I mean, it obviously changed, before the next National Congress for selection. But I thought it was interesting that Bapa had said, yeah, you're doing it the way I had asked you to do it. I mean, I felt good about that from his remark back. But I did realize that something was going to have to change in terms of the way we did it, because we couldn't conduct a full Congress taking 2 or 3 days to find the chairman.
Yeah.
And it did change. Yeah. So from that, I mean, all of this, the Latihan goes on strong here in Atlanta with the group that we have. It's a small group, but then there are some people outside that need some attention to helpers to be attentive to, which is a good thing, really. Sort of to stay engaged is important, not just in one's head, but in actually in doing it. Over the years, it's worked its way into my art considerably.
Yeah, how has being in Subud and doing Wadihan affected your work?
Well, a lot of people don't think too much of dreams, but there are 2 of them that were significant with respect to my art, and I'll make them brief. But one, I was in my studio in this sort of pretty extraordinary place, and there was a rap on my door, and someone opened it just a couple of inches and said, he'd like to see you. So, and I knew who he was. So I went out, and it was this wonderful, beautiful place. And I walked up to the top of it and went in, and there was a desk on the other side of me, and there was a high back chair. And the high back chair was turned with its back toward me. And behind that, on the wall behind that, was this enormous window that was looking out onto the universe. Then I realized who was sitting in that chair. And so this wonderful melodious voice says to me, Salahuddin, I would like for you to share with me your experience of my creation. And because I felt so inadequate and being a sort of a smart ass, I said, well, why are you asking me? You made it. Long pause, same voice, no inflection change. Says, Salahuddin, I would like for you to share with me your experience of my creation. I said, well, how would you have me do that? And the voice says, I've given you all the tools you need. Well, I didn't paint again for about 6 months. It just sort of shut me down because there was a different place I had to start everything from, right? So then I went back to work, and it was good. I had to confront that, and excuse me. And then I had this other experience of waking up in this in this palace. And I find myself sneaking around, and I open the door just a little bit, and I watch Van Gogh paint.
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, he's doing that. It's, oh, wait, no, it's like, wow. And I close the door and I'm walking along. I get up in the hall and I'm walking along, sort of puzzling all this over, and walking toward me are two figures, and one of them's El Greco and the other one's Nijinsky. And they say, hi, what are you doing? And I said, oh, nothing. I'm not doing anything. So I rush onto my own studio. And then I find myself peeking in the door of Rembrandt, watching what he's doing. And the fact that he's using sticks and his fingers and stuff. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And I go again, walking back to my thing, going like, oh, wow. So he's using sticks to make marks and all that. And again, walking toward me are these two characters again. And I said, what are you doing? You're always out and about. And I said, I just, I needed some exercise or something like that. So, but the third time I was on my way to see someplace else, and they stopped and said, where are you going? And I said, okay, all right. I've been spying on the other artists here. I've been lifting their techniques and their stuff. And they said, and they looked at each other and laughed, and they said, Salahuddin, where are you? And I said, well, I'm right here. They said, no, do you understand where you are? And I said, yeah. I said, no, where are you? And I said, well, I'm in the Palace of the Arts. And I said, yeah. Can you say that again? I'm in the Palace of the Arts. And it was like, oh, I'm in the Palace of the Arts. Wow. It's like I wouldn't be here if I wasn't supposed to be in the Palace of the Arts. So it was like, it doesn't matter what you look like, who you look at, or what they seem to show you. You're going to do what you have to do. And it was like, that solved a whole bunch going forward in the real world, in doing my work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I've gotten older, an interesting thing to me is that, when you're younger, you have this level of passion where maybe for 48 hours and 2 cups of coffee you can work, right?
Yeah.
Well, you get to 77, well, go back even further, earlier than that, 70, say, and you start realizing that passion is no longer the answer to it. So what do you do? What takes the place of passion in something like that? It's like, well, let's try out the words enthusiasm. Let's see if I can be enthusiastic about the work instead of passionate. And that's worked for me. It's allowed me to slow down, which I have to do inevitably, being now 77. But it still has a sense of energy about it, rather than just, if there's no passion, there's nothing. It's not true. And the Ladian is strong, and it is. I can sometimes feel it between me and the canvas.
Mm-hmm.
I've maintained that the real work takes place between here and that surface. It doesn't happen in here. It happens out here, in here. Mm-hmm. And when I can feel the Latihan in there, in that space, it's when I feel like I can get to the point, even in a big canvas, where I can feel like the viscosity is the same up here as it is down there. It's like, so that I'm engaged in the whole experience of it.
Yeah.
Those are magical times. You know, those are the times I think whatever slogging is required, those are the moments you make the effort for.
Yeah. Is that one of your paintings in back of you there?
Yes, it is actually. It's back here under repair because my dog put one of his fingernails through it.
I like it.
It's one of 7 of the chakras. So this will be the throat chakra. So I did 7 of them, and they're all exactly the same size, but there are 6 figures. And the 7th is you or me, whomever is looking at it is the 7th figure in it, which is like I see as sort of the 7 is a magical number, like in the 7 circles of the Subud symbol. So they all have that. It's called the messengers.
Neat. Yeah. I hope to see them someday.
Yeah, that would be nice. I'll send you a picture of all 7 of them in a line.
Great. Yes. And you were doing some work for ladies that had cancer. I remember seeing some of your paintings from that. It was quite extraordinary.
That was one of the sort of most difficult things to do, and one of the greatest rewards to do. And the Latihan was so much a part of that whole experience. Women would come in to model for me. I did these 26 paintings in 22 months, which was just is outrageous. I mean, it's just, you don't even really have time to finish one properly. But when someone was coming to my studio, I would feel myself get in where I would be making room. I could feel the Latihan making room for who this human being was. I'm telling you, Rahman, the trust that happened almost instantaneously was just dumbfounding to me. The whole story would unweave the tales of their support or lack of it, or what it was to them would just come out. I realized that I was only there as an agent to do what needed to be done, what was required here. And so I wanted every conceivable demographic that I could find, from Black, Asian, white, old, young, rich, poor, everything. And once it started, the calls from people who wanted to model were just amazing. And the thing was that most of the people said they wanted to do something other than just wearing pink. They wanted to give something to it, to the whole problem of breast cancer. So it was a remarkable experience for me. And I mean, it just was, again, I mean, the Latihan was so, I hesitate to say the Latihan, because what I really mean is that the Latihan manifested within me was a safe place, a safe space to be. And it was because the Latihan was a part of me that's what happened. Not the Latihan itself, if you understand the distinction.
Yeah, I understand.
And things that were, I had a bunch of these paintings set up in, I probably had 4 studios while I got all this done. One of the studios, I had a number of these paintings set up, and a woman came, brought a friend with her. And the 3 of us were talking, and this woman sort of drifted off by herself and was looking at the paintings. And I walked over to her and I said, "Are you okay? Everything okay?" She said, "Yeah," but she said, "You know, about 6 months ago, my best friend died of breast cancer." She said, "I had written her eulogy, but I was never able to give it. Would you mind awfully if I stood here and read her eulogy for you all?" And I said, "No, I mean, it would be, a brilliant honor if you did that." So she got in her purse and pulled out this eulogy that she always carried with her and stood there in the midst of 5 or 6 of these large, they're all the same size, 5 feet by 4 feet. She stood there in the midst of 4 or 5 of these things and read the eulogy she had written for her friend that she'd never been able to read. And stories like that just went on and on and on in doing this production. And the night of the show, which was an amazing success at a well-known gallery in Atlanta, all the models came who had been in this series. And this one woman, a Chinese woman, who was a senior partner in a worldwide law firm, who had been the Chinese, what was her title? She was the president of the Chinese American Pacific Rim organization. When she gave her talk of when she was inducted into that position, she said she wanted to stop in her talk and talk about breast cancer because Asians don't recognize it, don't admit to it, don't acknowledge it. So she came to the studio, invited. When someone signed up, I said, "Well, bring your husband or you whatever with you. I wanted to make sure they know this is on the up and up." So she brought her husband and 2 daughters, one of them was, I think, 11, and the other one was like 7, maybe 7 or 8. So they came to the studio, and we talked about how we would do this. And she was going to be topless, and the daughters were going to have on, like little spaghetti strap sleeping shirts. And all 3 of them were going to be in the painting. And the woman came up to me and she said, "The girls aren't very happy about me being topless." And I said, "That's fine. It doesn't have to be any way in particular. I want it to be comfortable. I want it to be authentic and genuine. So whatever it takes." So they came back again and we talked for a little while, and she came over to me again and she said, "My daughters think it would be okay for me to be topless." I said, "Okay." So here's this very lovely woman, high-powered attorney. She's at the show with her 2 daughters in front of her painting where she is topless. And the international elite of that law company are wandering by and shaking her hand and telling her how proud they are of her that she's doing this thing, that she has done this. And meanwhile, I'm just astonished at the whole thing. And if there was ever a place where I just knew from beginning to end that the Latihan was involved, that was the project. That was just amazing. And when I've shown it at other museums, people have come in, like support groups have come in buses, and they walk through and they find the one that they most relate to, and 2 or 3 of them will stand in front of that painting and somebody will take their picture. And that's how they respond to it. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime kind of experience, but it was so magical.
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
But yeah, you know, I had the studio and I was sleeping on a cot in this. The studio must have been 25,000 square feet. I mean, it was ridiculous size studio. But I had not only these paintings in it, but I had all the other work I was doing as well. But I was sleeping on a mat because I was in such short time. And in my studio, traditionally, all my things are on wheels. My paint table's on wheels, my easels are on wheels, everything I've got is on wheels. So at night, I would turn out all the lights and I would bring a painting up to the foot of the bed and I'd have a flashlight. And I would be looking at the painting, you know, as I would go to sleep, and maybe I'd have a little yellow pad and I'd make a note about changing the color or having to do something like that. And then I'd turn off the flashlight and go to sleep. And the first thing I woke up to was that painting at the foot of my bed. This went on for months.
Yeah.
This was exhausting, but very rewarding.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's, you know, and it's like those sorts of things. And we all, I think maybe, you know, I think that my greatest joy or sense of joy comes when I have a sense of gratitude. I feel like gratitude is really the source of joy.
Yeah.
And that experience gave me you know, great joy. I mean, there, you know, and everywhere I would look, I found that, you know, just I was overwhelmed with gratitude for it.
Yeah.
So you spend your days joyful. So that's kind of how that worked. And since then, you know, I don't think I have another. I mean, one doesn't know. I keep swearing that I'm not going to do any big paintings again, but here I am doing a painting that's 7 feet tall and 5.5 feet wide. Why am I doing that? I don't know. But you know, a painting sometimes tells you what it wants to be,
Yeah.
if you let it. But from, you know, from the time I was opened to now, to today, I don't believe I've ever had a doubt about my ultimate fate. And I don't know whether that's because of the presence of the grace of God. It may as well be, you know, I may as well say that's what that is. But I've never doubted through hard times, dumb times, stupid times. Even in spite of that, I've never really doubted the outcome of my fate. And that's the Latihan.
Yeah. I think I feel that too.
Yeah, I would think you do. You know, I'd see your work, and I've told you in my note to you that there's something wonderful in the reminder of that enthusiasm. Because as we've gotten older, of course, we've all gotten caught up in our certain life patterns that, you know, move us away from the times when we were able to drop everything and go do this because we were so enthusiastic and over the moon about it. We can't do that anymore. So that kind of enthusiasm begins to diminish. Not that the inner loses it, but it's like the activity, the action that we actually perform in it does. So to see those old pictures is like a great reminder of what manifested itself outwardly from what was going on the inside.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate them because it's a reminder of what is alive on the inner. That's valuable to me. So keep doing it, please. I know you got to have hundreds and hundreds more photos laying around.
Yeah, there are thousands.
Yeah, I would think so.
Ah,
What can I say, Bachman?
I'm happy. Thank you.
Good. I would have hoped to have waxed more poetically about the truths and realities of the spiritual world, but I just don't have
Well,
that makeup.
you don't have to say it, you show it.
Well, thank you, my brother. I hope sometime to see you.
Yes,
Other than this.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to end the recording now. I just wanted to ask you, the last question is that, is it okay with you if I show this recording to other people? And I will be putting up a YouTube video of it. And it's going to be also sent to the Subud archives.
Okay. If you feel it's worthy, do.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rahman. God bless you, man.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording if I can figure out where to do that. Let's see. Let's see.
Well, I could leave if you want. That would stop it, wouldn't it?
Oh, wait a minute. Usually there's some kind of a little button to push the